A forgotten prophecy spoke of a sky-serpent breathing fire before fields turned to ash. Another detailed how a whispering stone bleeding rust would herald a king crowned with salt. One obscure text even described 3 moons dancing in the sky as iron horsemen prepared to ride, and yet another foretold of men flying without wings, while rivers carried unseen sickness. These are just a few of the startling predictions made by medieval religious sects you probably never heard of. Groups who saw the future in ways that mainstream society often dismissed or feared. Their prophecies, recorded on everything from woven tapestries to stone tablets, offer a glimpse into a world teeming with unusual beliefs and chilling foresight. Number 8. The Silent Weavers of Thrace and the Ash-Covered Fields. Deep within the remote forested valleys of Thrace, a region known for its fierce independence and syncretic spiritual traditions, there existed a community known as the Silent Weavers. Active primarily between the 9th and 11th centuries, this sect was unique in that its spiritual leaders and prophets were exclusively women. They believed that the divine communicated its will not through spoken words or written scripture, but through the intricate patterns and colors woven into their tapestries. These were not mere decorative items, they were sacred texts, each thread imbued with meaning, each knot a divine syllable. The weavers lived in small, self-sufficient communities, often hidden away from larger settlements to avoid scrutiny from the dominant Byzantine Orthodox Church, which viewed their practices with suspicion. Their rituals involved periods of prolonged silence, meditation, and the communal creation of vast, complex tapestries. The master weavers' women who had dedicated their lives to this craft would enter trance-like states, their hands seemingly guided by an unseen force as they selected threads of specific hues: indigo for sorrow, crimson for conflict, gold for divine intervention, and a rare, unsettling gray spun from unblayed, singed wool for desolation. One of their most significant prophetic works was a tapestry known as the Sky-Serpent's Lament. According to fragmented accounts found in a 17th century folklorist journal, which itself claimed to transcribe older oral traditions, this tapestry was exceptionally large, taking 3 generations of weavers to complete. It depicted a colossal serpentine form coiling through a night sky rendered in the deepest indigos and blacks. The serpent, woven with threads of fiery orange, yellow, and a disturbing sickly green, was shown breathing a plume of what appeared to be incandescent fire or smoke down upon a stylized representation of the land. Below this celestial drama, the tapestry detailed scenes of profound devastation. Villages were shown as smoldering ruins, their inhabitants depicted as small gray figures lying prone. The fields, normally woven in vibrant greens and yellows, were instead vast expanses of ashen gray and charred black. A particularly chilling section described in the folklorist notes showed birds falling from the sky, their forms little more than dark smudges against a smoke-filled horizon. The rivers were woven in a muddy, lifeless brown. The final panels of the Sky-Serpent's Lament reportedly showed survivors, their forms gaunt, wandering through a barren landscape under a sky perpetually choked with a hazy, orange light. The exact meaning attributed to the Sky-Serpent by the weavers themselves is not fully known. Some interpretations from the folklorist's journal suggest it could have represented a comet, a meteor shower of unusual intensity, or perhaps a more metaphorical harbinger of divine wrath. The prophecy did not specify a date, but rather a sequence of signs that would precede the events. A series of unusually harsh winters, the birth of twin calves with mismatched eyes in 3 separate villages, and a great star that would weep light for 7 nights. The original Sky-Serpent's Lament tapestry has never been found. It is believed to have been either destroyed during periods of religious persecution or hidden so well by the last of the Silent Weavers that its location remains a mystery. The only surviving evidence comes from these secondary accounts and alleged copies of small sections, which themselves are subject to scholarly debate. Nevertheless, the legend of this woven prophecy persists in Thracian folklore, a haunting reminder of a time when women sought to read the future in the language of thread and color, foreseeing a calamity that would turn fertile lands into fields of ash. Number 7. The Brethren of the Undisturbed Stone and the Salt-Crowned King. In the mist-shrouded hills and bogs of medieval Ireland, particularly between the 7th and 10th centuries, a reclusive group known as the Brethren of the Undisturbed Stone practiced their unique faith. Their beliefs were a curious amalgamation of early Christian teachings, likely introduced by hermit monks, and much older pre-Christian Druidic traditions centered on the spiritual power of megalithic structures, dolmens, standing stones, and stone circles. The Brethren held that these ancient stones were not mere rocks, but conduits to the divine repositories of ancestral wisdom and markers of potent earth energies. They were not a monastic order in the traditional sense, but rather a loose affiliation of families and individuals who revered these sites. Their practices were secretive, largely due to the disapproval of the more established Celtic Christian Church, which often sought to Christianize or demonize such pagan-leaning traditions. The Brethren would gather at these stone sites during specific lunar phases or astronomical alignments, performing quiet rituals that involved chanting, anointing the stones with water from sacred wells, and listening for whispers, subtle sounds, or feelings they believed were communications from the spirits of the land or from God through the medium of the stone. One of their most enigmatic prophecies is referred to in scattered references as the Ogham of Bleeding Iron. Ogham was an early medieval alphabet used primarily to write the early Irish language, often found inscribed on stone monuments. This particular prophecy, however, was not said to be inscribed by human hands in Ogham, but rather manifested on a specific unworked standing stone known only to the Brethren's inner circle. This stone, called an cloch runda, a secret stone, was supposedly located deep within a secluded valley in what is now County Clare. According to the fragmented legends, the prophecy would be revealed when an cloch runda began to bleed rust. This was not a gradual discoloration, but a sudden and dramatic appearance of reddish-brown streaks, as if the stone itself were weeping iron-rich water. This phenomenon was said to be the primary sign. The prophecy itself, interpreted from the pattern of these streaks or from visions received by the Brethren's seers during this event, foretold the coming of a king from the sea. This king would not be of Irish royal blood, but would arrive with a large fleet of serpent-prowed ships. He would wear a crown of salt, signifying his dominion over the ocean or his origins from a land far across it. The prophecy continued, stating that this salt-crowned king and his warriors, described as men with eyes like the winter sky and hair like ripened straw, would claim the Green Isle not by right, but by red hand. This suggested a period of intense conflict and conquest. The prophecy also mentioned that the old ways would be drowned in the tide of new words and new gods, hinting at a significant cultural and religious upheaval that would follow the invasion. The Brethren believed this event would irrevocably alter the spiritual landscape of Ireland, potentially silencing the whispering stones they so revered. No definitive archaeological evidence of an cloch runda or the Ogham of Bleeding Iron has ever been uncovered. leading many to consider it pure folklore. However, a few obscure monastic annals from the period make passing cryptic references to stone worshippers in the western regions who spoke of iron tears on sacred stones, foretelling Viking incursions or raids by the Lochlani, the Irish term for Norsemen. These brief mentions are tantalizing, suggesting that the core elements of the prophecy were known beyond the sect itself. The Brethren of the Undisturbed Stone eventually faded into obscurity, their beliefs likely absorbed or suppressed, but the legend of their rust-bleeding oracle stone and its prophecy of a sea-born, salt-crowned king persists as a curious footnote in the rich tapestry of Irish medieval mysticism. Number 6. The Children of the Seventh Star and the Westward Sun. Nestled high in the nearly inaccessible valleys of the Pyrenees Mountains, straddling the borderlands between what would eventually become France and Spain, the Children of the Seventh Star flourished in relative isolation from roughly the 10th to the 13th centuries. This small ascetic community was devoted to an esoteric belief system that combined elements of Gnostic Christianity, ancient astronomical observations, and a unique cosmology centered on a supposed seventh star, or celestial body, invisible to the naked eye, but profoundly influential on human destiny and the workings of the cosmos. The Children of the Seventh Star believed that the known universe, with its visible stars and planets, was merely a veil for a deeper, more significant reality. Their spiritual leaders, known as sky readers, spent decades meticulously observing the night sky, not with sophisticated instruments, which they lacked, but with keen eyesight, complex geometric calculations recorded on slate tablets, and a system of oral tradition that cataloged minute celestial changes over generations. They constructed simple but precise observatories on high mountain peaks, using aligned stones and carved notches in rock faces to track solstices, equinoxes, and the movements of planets and prominent stars. Their core prophecy, detailed in a collection of sheepskin parchments known as the Celestial Cartulary of Alnair, Alnair being their name for this hidden seventh star, meaning the bright unseen one in their blended vernacular, spoke of a time of great cosmic and terrestrial upheaval, the cartulary portions of which were allegedly rediscovered in a sealed earthenware jar in a Pyrenean cave in the early 20th century by a local shepherd, though the parchment's current whereabouts are unknown, adding to their mystique, did not predict an end of the world, but a profound transformation. The prophecy began with the sign of Alnair itself, the seventh star, the bright unseen one, shall dim in the mind's eye of the sky readers, its influence waning like a forgotten dream. This was not a literal dimming in the sky, as Alnair was already considered invisible, but a fading of its perceived spiritual power, or a disruption in the ability of the sky readers to connect with it. This celestial sign was to be followed by terrestrial chaos. The great rivers that carve the world shall hesitate in their courses, and some shall even appear to run backwards towards their mountain sources. This was interpreted by some later commentators on the alleged fragments as symbolic of great social or political unrest, where established orders would be overturned. The most striking part of the prophecy concerned a new sun. It stated, "And when the old ways are fractured, and the memory of Alnair is but a whisper, a new sun shall rise, not from the east, as is its custom, but from the west, beyond the great ocean that kisses the feet of the world." This western sun was described not as a celestial body of fire, but as a source of blinding light and shadow, bringing with it new knowledge, new masters, and reshaping of the very maps of the earth. The Children of the Seventh Star were eventually dispersed. Historical records are sparse, but it is believed that their unusual cosmological beliefs and their detachment from mainstream religious doctrines led to increasing pressure from both secular and ecclesiastical authorities. accusations of heresy or star worship may have contributed to their decline. The celestial cartulary of Alnair, if it ever truly existed as described, remains an elusive beacon. Yet, the core of its prophecy, the dimming of a guiding spiritual influence, rivers running contrary to their nature, and the rise of a dominant new power or era originating from the West, continues to intrigue those who study the fringes of medieval prophetic traditions. Number 5. The Keepers of the Subterranean Flame and the Silver City. In the geologically volatile landscapes of central Anatolia, a land marked by ancient volcanoes, hot springs, and mysterious subterranean vents, a secretive sect known as the Keepers of the Subterranean Flame maintained their watch from approximately the 8th to the 12th centuries. Their belief system was rooted in the idea that an eternal sacred flame burned deep within the earth, a direct manifestation of a powerful, often wrathful, chthonic deity or primal force. This flame was not just a physical phenomenon to them, but the very heart of the world, its pulsations dictating the fate of civilizations above. The Keepers often established their small fortified communities near areas with significant geothermal activity, such as Cappadocia with its unique rock formations and underground cities, or near dormant volcanic cones. They were regarded with a mixture of fear and awe by local populations, who sometimes sought their intercession to appease the earth spirits or to gain insight into future events, though the Keepers themselves remained largely aloof. Their rituals were said to involve vigils held at the mouths of steaming fissures or caves, from which sulfurous gases emanated places they considered portals to the subterranean realm. They meticulously recorded seismic tremors, changes in gas, emissions, and other geological anomalies, viewing them as omens. Their most significant prophetic utterances were inscribed on a series of fired clay tablets, collectively referred to by the few scholars who have studied translated excerpts as the Tablets of Smoldering Earth. These tablets, allegedly discovered in the late 19th century by French archaeologists exploring a collapsed underground dwelling near a forgotten volcanic caldera, were written in a unique script that blended elements of Greek and older Anatolian language. The tablets themselves were described as being unusually dark, as if baked in intense smoke-filled heat. The prophecy detailed on these tablets spoke of a cataclysmic period. It began with the words, "The earth, our great mother, will groan under the weight of imbalance, her bones will creak, and her hot breath will become a roar." This was to be a prelude to a more terrifying event. For 7 days and 7 nights, the subterranean flame will belch black smoke that will steal the sun, and the sky will weep ash, the mountains will dance like frightened goats, and the lowlands will drink the rage of the inner fire. This vividly describes a massive volcanic eruption, accompanied by significant earthquakes. The prophecy went on to state, "Cities built by prideful hands will be swallowed whole, their treasures turning to dross, their people to dust motes in a fiery wind. The memory of their names will be scorched from the land. Its foundations will be wisdom learned from the deep fire, and its walls will be peace. And the subterranean flame, its great exhalation complete, will sleep once more, content." The exact location where these tablets were found, if the account is accurate, has been lost to time, and the tablets themselves have not been publicly accessible for decades, leading to skepticism about their authenticity. However, the imagery and narrative of the prophecy align with the known geological history of Anatolia, a region that has experienced numerous devastating earthquakes and volcanic events throughout history. The Keepers of the Subterranean Flame, with their reverence for the Earth's inner fire, may have simply been astute observers of their environment, translating its powerful and destructive potential into a spiritual and prophetic framework that culminated in the vision of a purified world and a silver city rising from the ruins. Number 4. The Order of the Crimson Dew and the Iron Horsemen. Hidden away in the dense ancient forests of Bohemia, primarily during the 13th and 14th centuries, existed a highly secretive and enigmatic group known as the Order of the Crimson Dew. Their practices and beliefs were shrouded in mystery, largely because they were relentlessly persecuted by both secular authorities and the established church, who accused them of witchcraft, heresy, and consorting with demonic forces. What little is known about them comes from fragmented inquisitorial records, local folklore, and a few contested manuscript fragments attributed to disillusioned former members. The core of the Order's ritual practice allegedly revolved around a rare psychoactive plant they called Ros Solis Cruentus, or the bloodied sundew, though botanists have never definitively identified such a plant with the properties ascribed to it. According to the accusations, the crimson dew was a reddish, glistening substance found on the leaves of this plant under specific conditions, perhaps during dawn after a particular lunar phase. The Order's initiates, after periods of fasting and purification, would purportedly ingest this substance in carefully controlled amounts during clandestine ceremonies, held deep within the forest, usually in natural clearings or hidden groves. This ingestion was said to induce profound visionary states, which they believed allowed them to commune directly with the spiritual realm and perceive hidden truths about the past, present, and future. Their prophecies were not written down by the visionaries themselves while in their altered states. Instead, a designated scribe, known as the Recorder of Whispers, who did not partake of the crimson dew during these specific rituals, would meticulously document the utterances, gestures, and symbolic visions described by the entranced members. These records were compiled into a sacred text known only to the highest echelons of the Order, often referred to in secondary sources as the Vermilion Codex or the Book of the Red Drop. One of the most compelling and unsettling prophecies attributed to the Vermilion Codex, as recounted in a purported confession of a captured Order member from 1427, spoke of a series of startling omens followed by a period of brutal conflict. The prophecy began, "Look to the night sky when the veil is thin. 3 moons shall dance where one once held sway, their silver light casting threefold shadows upon the troubled earth." This image of 3 moons was often interpreted symbolically by later commentators, though the Order itself may have believed in a literal, if inexplicable, celestial event. Following this celestial sign, the prophecy continued, "The rivers and streams of the land shall run not with clear water, but with a liquid, the color of dark wine, and a strange sweetness shall hang in the air, though it brings no joy." This could allude to pollution, an unusual algal bloom, or again, a more symbolic corruption of nature's purity. The most fearsome part of the prophecy detailed the arrival of iron horsemen. "A new tongue will be spoken, and the children will not know the names of their grandfathers' gods." This vision pointed towards a devastating war, or invasion, that would not only bring physical destruction, but also lead to a profound and lasting cultural and spiritual displacement, a loss of ancestral heritage. The Order of the Crimson Dew was eventually eradicated, its members hunted down, its sacred sites destroyed, and its Vermilion Codex, if it ever existed as a single compiled volume, presumably burned or lost. The very nature of their practices, relying on a potentially hallucinogenic substance, makes the objective truth of their visions debatable. Yet the fragments of their prophecies that survive in hostile records paint a vivid picture of a world on the brink of violent change, foreseen by a persecuted few who sought truth in the mystical properties of a legendary plant hidden in the Bohemian wilderness. Number 3. The Penitents of the Shattered Moon and the Mountain's Thunderous Voice. On the island of Sicily, particularly in the shadow of the active volcano Mount Etna. A small and austere sect, known as the Penitents of the Shattered Moon, practiced their faith from the 11th to the early 14th centuries. Their theology was a unique and rather melancholic blend of Christian asceticism and a cosmological myth centered on the moon. The Penitents believed that the moon was not originally the cratered, imperfect sphere known to them, but had once been a perfect, whole, luminous orb, a pristine mirror of God's creation. However, due to the accumulated weight of human sin and transgression, this perfect moon had shattered or cracked in the heavens, its fractured state a perpetual celestial reminder of humanity's fall from grace. The Penitents lived simple, often solitary lives, establishing small hermitages on the rugged slopes of Etna or along desolate stretches of the Sicilian coastline. They dedicated themselves to lives of prayer, extreme fasting, and constant penance, hoping that their sacrifices might in some small way contribute to the eventual healing of the shattered moon and by extension the redemption of the world. They were meticulous observers of the moon in all its phases, believing that its appearance, eclipses, halos, and even the patterns of its craters held prophetic significance. Their leaders, known as lunar oracles or speculari lunae moon watchers, would spend countless nights gazing at the sky, recording their observations and interpretations on scrolls made from treated animal hides. One of their most detailed prophecies is found in a collection of these writings known as the Luna Fragmenta Scrolls, fragments of which were allegedly found preserved in a dry cave on Etna's western flank by a goatherd in the 18th century. These scrolls, written in a mixture of vernacular Sicilian and liturgical Latin, describe a specific sequence of omens leading to a catastrophic event. The prophecy begins: when the mother moon in her sorrow weeps silver tears upon the face of the great sea for 3 consecutive nights, know that the time of trial is near. These silver tears have been interpreted by scholars of the fragments as referring to an exceptionally bright and prolonged lunar halo, or perhaps a series of nights where moonlight reflecting on the Mediterranean Sea created an unusual shimmering effect, perceived as tears by the devout penitents. Following this lunar sign, the prophecy foretold terrestrial distress. The island itself will tremble, not with the joyous dance of life, but with the ague of fear. The stones will cry out from the walls of houses, and the earth will open its mouth in unexpected places. This clearly points to a period of significant seismic activity, earthquakes that would shake the foundations of Sicilian settlements. The culmination of the prophecy centered on Mount Etna, which the Penitents referred to as Il Monte Lamentoso, the mournful mountain, or the Great Cinder. Many will flee, but the land itself will be forever changed, a testament to the moon's enduring sorrow and the earth's deep pain. This is a vivid description of a major eruption of Mount Etna, one significant enough to alter the coastline and devastate the surrounding areas. The Penitents of the Shattered Moon gradually disappeared, their numbers likely dwindling due to the harshness of their ascetic lifestyle, natural disasters, or absorption into more mainstream religious orders. The Luna Fragmenta Scrolls, if genuine, offer a fascinating insight into a group that saw in the imperfections of the moon a reflection of human failing, and in the volatile power of their volcanic home, a coming judgment and transformation. Their prophecy serves as a poignant reminder of how medieval communities interpreted natural phenomena through the lens of their unique spiritual beliefs. Number 2. The Whisperers of the Forgotten Tree and the Wingless Men. Deep within the shadowy confines of the Schwarzwald, the Black Forest of medieval Germany, a reclusive and poorly understood group known as the Whisperers of the Forgotten Tree existed primarily between the 9th and 13th centuries. Their spiritual practices were deeply animistic, likely evolving from ancient Germanic pagan beliefs that had survived or syncretized with the slow encroachment of Christianity. The central focus of their worship was a single, exceptionally ancient tree, believed to be an oak or a yew of immense size and age, which they called der uralte Sprecher, the ancient speaker, or simply the forgotten tree. This tree was not just sacred, it was considered an oracle, a living conduit between the earthly realm and the world of spirits or deities. The Whisperers, as their name suggests, did not rely on written texts or elaborate rituals in the conventional sense. Instead, they practiced a form of divination based on interpreting the sounds produced by the wind as it passed through the leaves, branches, and hollows of the forgotten tree. Different rustlings, sighs, groans, or whistles were meticulously catalogued and assigned specific meanings, passed down through generations of Lasker. Listeners, individuals within the sect deemed to have a special sensitivity to the tree's voice. These interpretations, along with longer prophecies received during prolonged vigils at the tree's base, were sometimes recorded on treated strips of birch bark or thin wooden panels, collectively referred to in local legends as Die Asten Spruch, the branch sayings, or the Elderwood Sutras. One of the most striking and unsettling prophecies attributed to the forgotten tree, recorded in a supposed transcription of several bark fragments found near a reputed cult site in the 19th century, paints a picture of radical environmental and technological change. The prophecy, pieced together from these fragments, begins with a lament from the tree itself. The ancient speaker will weep tears of bark, its skin peeling like sunburnt flesh, for the little brothers of the forest who will fall silent one by one. This was interpreted by the Whisperers as a sign of widespread deforestation and the decline of the forest ecosystem they depended upon. The prophecy continues with even more unusual imagery. The forest floor, once soft with needles and leaves, will be littered with the discarded carapaces of giant metallic beetles. These beetles will crawl upon the land, leaving trails of smoke and thunder, their bellies full of men. This bizarre vision of metallic beetles has been pondered by those who study such obscure texts. Perhaps the most startling part of the prophecy concerns human beings. Men will take to the skies, not upon the feathered wings of birds, nor carried by the whims of spirits, but within roaring chariots, that mock the eagles. They will soar without wings, yet their flight will cast long shadows of fear upon the earth. This prediction of wingless human flight was profoundly alien to the medieval worldview. Finally, the prophecy spoke of the hidden sickness, and the rivers, the lifeblood of the land, will turn sluggish and dark, carrying unseen sickness from hidden sources. The fish will turn their bellies to the sun, and those who drink downstream will wither from within, their ailments a mystery to the healers. This points to a future of widespread water pollution and insidious, difficult to diagnose illnesses. The Whisperers of the Forgotten Tree eventually vanished, their practices deemed heretical, or simply fading, as the forests receded, and their sacred tree was likely felled. The authenticity of the Elderwood Sutras is debated, with some scholars dismissing them as later forgeries or misinterpretations of local folklore. Nevertheless, the vivid and strangely prescient imagery contained within these alleged prophecies of ecological destruction, strange new machines, human flight, and invisible pollutants offers a chilling vision from a forgotten sect that sought wisdom in the whispers of an ancient tree. Number 1. The Guild of the Inverted Reflection and the City of Masks, True Grief. In the labyrinthine canals and shadowy alleys of medieval Venice, particularly during its ascent as a maritime power from the 12th to the 15th centuries, a highly esoteric and clandestine society known as the Guild of the Inverted Reflection purportedly operated. This was not a religious sect in the traditional sense of worshipping a deity, but rather a philosophical and divinatory collective. They adhered to a complex cosmological view that the physical world, perceived by ordinary senses, was merely a flawed, distorted reflection, an inverted image of a truer, more perfect, and often unseen reality. They believed that by carefully observing and interpreting anomalies and disturbances in reflections, particularly in water-polished metal or specially prepared dark mirrors, one could gain glimpses into this truer world and thus foresee future events or hidden truths. The guild's members were rumored to include disillusioned scholars, alchemists, glassmakers with an esoteric bent, and even some disenfranchised nobles. Their meeting places were said to be secret, often in secluded courtyards, hidden chambers accessible only by water, or even on gondolas, shrouded in mist during the dead of night. Their practices involved complex rituals of scrying, where adepts would gaze into reflective surfaces for hours, seeking patterns, symbols, or visions. These interpretations were highly symbolic and allegorical, recorded in coded journals or treatises, one of which is legendarily known as the Speculum Inversum, the inverted mirror. No complete copy of this manuscript is known to exist, but tantalizing excerpts and references appear in obscure Renaissance-era occult texts. One of the most poignant prophecies attributed to the Guild of the Inverted Reflection, as described in these later commentaries on the Speculum Inversum, directly concerned their own city, Venice, often called La Serenissima, the most serene. The prophecy was not tied to a specific date, but to a confluence of ominous signs observed in the city's ubiquitous reflections. It began with a potent symbol of Venice. When the winged lion, steadfast guardian of the lagoon, gazes into the waters and sees its own noble face twisted into a grimace of sorrow, or its form wavering as if drowning in its own reflection, let the wise take heed. This referred to the iconic Lion of St. Mark and suggested that a distortion in its reflection in the waters of the Grand Canal or the Bacino di San Marco would be a primary omen. The prophecy continued, describing a change in the very waters that were Venice's lifeblood. The canals, those liquid streets that mirror the sky, shall run black, not with the velvet of night, but with a palpable sorrow, a darkness that swallows light and hope. The shimmering dance of sunlight on water will cease, replaced by a dull, lifeless sheen. This was not necessarily a literal blackening of the water, but perhaps a symbolic representation of despair or a pervasive ill. The city of masks, ever reveling in disguise and illusion, will be forced to wear a true face, a face of unfeigned grief and widespread lamentation. The laughter will die in the piazzas, replaced by the tolling of funeral bells that echo from every campanile. This chilling passage vividly describes a pervasive and indiscriminate plague or pestilence, one that would strip away the city's famed gaiety and force its inhabitants to confront a stark, unmasked reality of suffering and death. The Guild of the Inverted Reflection, if it truly operated as the legends suggest, would have found its esoteric practices increasingly dangerous during periods of heightened religious orthodoxy or social panic, such as during major plague outbreaks. They likely faded into deeper secrecy or disbanded, their unique methods of divination becoming lost or absorbed into other occult traditions. The Speculum Inversum remains a ghostly text, but its purported prophecy for Venice serves as a somber reminder of how this city, built on water and light, was also intimately familiar with shadow illusion and the ever-present possibility of devastating loss, as seen through the eyes of those who sought truth in its inverted reflections.